Athens City Council meeting night, and we have three separate committee meetings. One is Finance and Personnel, which is first, then the Transportation Committee second, and finally Community Issues third. And Jim Sands and I co-chair the Finance and Personnel Committee, and the first item is mine. It has to do with James Knapp, who was injured while performing his duty as a city firefighter and placed on medical disability. After a while, after treatment, then he was allowed to come back to light duty, but at the administration's decision at that time, he was not allowed to come back. He lost his Ohio Fire and Police Pension Service credit. And so I'm championing this cause, and I may be all alone, because I feel like it's a sense of basic fair play. The contract is silent on this issue, and so it's not a matter for negotiations at this time. It might in the future. First, let me make the point that since James Knapp had that experience, there have been at least 4 or 5 firefighters who've had the same experience and have been allowed to come back on light duty. I don't know what issue the service director was operating under at the time, but he refused this, even though the workers' comp people had said it was okay. The other thing that I think is important is when the various times I've been chair or administrator at the university, it was always the case that there were procedures that got you into the position where you knew that your pension had to be paid if you were in Japan or whatever else, or if you were on leave or pregnancy leave or whatever else was happening. And so, it seemed to me that one single person, this is James Knapp, is suffering as a consequence, and just because he was in the wrong place with his bad back at the wrong time. And he did hurt it. He didn't fall off a bar stool. He hurt it while he was working on the fire truck. And again, let me stress that our contract is silent on this. He started to do, or it's at least faint if non-existent. He started the process once he was notified that he would have to work another year. I think that anybody who knows people with bad backs understand as you get older it gets more dicey, and I don't know how that will serve him, and he can't, I don't suppose. I didn't ask him straight up, but it's about $4,600 to replace the pension when he was denied the right to work. Heaven knows we could have used the inspection work at that time, but it didn't get done. Now it is being done, as I said before. And so we have this request. Some of you, all of you, I think, got a letter from him. And he's asked us, he was told by the personnel director that if it was going to happen, council would have to do it. And so I would like to put it up next time, and if we'll move, if you want to, we can suspend the rules. If you want to vote it down, you can vote it down. He knows where to go next, if that's the way it's going to be. But fundamentally, that's where I don't know that I want to suspend the rules. I've been avoiding suspending the rules for 3 months. Why would I do it on this? But fundamentally, every month we wait, it goes up in price. Paul said he's going to go with Beverly, but we're a different entity, aren't we? We can say, this guy was not treated the same as his fellow workers, and have a little compassion. So basically, that's the situation. The ordinance looks like it just has the same whereases that I just articulated. You would have to be injured on, we're setting up a series of conditions. You'd have to be injured while performing his duty, medical disability, medical release to return to light duty by workers' comp, denied by the city administration, saying that modified duty was not available. And therefore, he lost his pension service, and he sat around, I guess, while he was on leave, was not able to continue. So that's where it is. Any comments, questions? I know Patrick's got something he's going to say.
Should I go ahead and speak now?
I don't care, Patrick. If you want my undying wrath, you just get ready.
Madam Chair, I should know better, but
you should.
Obviously, I haven't learned my lesson just yet. Let me just say at the outset that I don't know this employee, and from what Member Bain has said, I think what happened to him flat out stinks.
What was that word again?
Stinks.
Stinks. Could you define stinks? Okay. All right.
I also think that this ordinance is a noble attempt to right a wrong. However, I also think that this ordinance, well-intentioned as it is, sets a dangerous precedent and has the potential to get the city into trouble down the road. This employee, in this case, is a member of AFSCME, a bargaining unit which has a negotiated collective bargaining agreement with the city of Athens. That collective bargaining agreement calls for a grievance procedure, which was bargained. And in this case, a grievance was in fact filed. The union, however, withdrew this grievance and chose not to pursue it. So in my opinion, this is a proper subject for bargaining. And so now we basically have a request to not really go around the procedures because, as Member Bain says, there's nothing that directly speaks to this particular issue in the contract. But we have a request to grant relief in addition to that which would be called for under the collective bargaining agreement, and to grant direct relief to a single employee. Now, does City Council have the authority to single out one person like this and grant this relief? In my opinion, yes. This council does have that authority if it should choose to do so. However, the question then becomes that what happens the next time an employee of the city is not happy with a decision that they get out of the administration or is not happy with the result of a grievance that they file through their union? Will they come to this city council and also request some kind of special relief or direct relief? And moreover, if the city council at that time should choose not to intervene and not grant that relief, then we've created a double standard. We've created a situation in which an employee can come forward and say, well, in the past, city council did this to help out this employee. Why won't you do this to help me? And in that case, we've got, again, a different treatment, and that will virtually guarantee a lawsuit. And so that's why I feel that it's important for me to speak out on this today. Again, this ordinance being put forth with the very best of intentions, but in my opinion has the potential to open up a real can of worms for the city down the road. And so for as much as I honor and respect what this ordinance is attempting to do, I feel like I would be derelict in my duty to the city if I didn't voice some of these concerns here today and just recommend that City Council stay out of this fight. Thank you.
And let's clarify that he withdrew his grievance because there was no way that the amount could be paid. Isn't that correct, Pat?
Madam Chair, all I've seen on this is a letter from AFSCME Council 8 to the Service Safety Director at the time, dated November 6th of last year, in which it just states that the union says, quote, after reviewing the grievance, please be advised that the union is withdrawing the grievance from any further proceedings without prejudice, and it does not speak to those issues. So if there's more information to that, it wasn't in the packet that I was provided.
Okay. And then let me reiterate, even though you say there's a double standard, there already is one because 4 people have had injured backs, and because they have a different service safety director, they get to work on light duty and they get their pension. So what's the deal?
Well, I think I'm speaking to a slightly different question than you are. I'm not speaking necessarily to the same outcomes, but rather to the same procedure, the same procedures being followed. Whereas that is an administrative call that the service safety director chose to make, and for as much as we may not think that was the right call to make, if we set that precedent of stepping in to say, we're going to grant this relief in this case, then I really think we've tied our hands in the future as to what we do with the next aggrieved employee that comes forward.
You mean when we spell out exactly what the circumstances for our decision are, that you'd be heard on duty and medical disability, and where you would be denied a medical release to return to light duty?
I want to be very clear that I'm not looking to the specific facts of this case, because
okay.
Because again, this is not for me about this particular employee. This is about a precedent that we're setting as to whether or not City Council wants to get involved with these fights, and I'm just trying to again do my duty to try to keep us out of trouble down the road.
Okay, we can all think. Anybody else? So the employee loses a year of his pension because the service safety director. All right, go ahead. Chris.
I do have another question. Then, am I understanding right that AFSCME withdrew the grievance, and so if we would not move forward with this ordinance, there would be no other way
I think that's
of
another
addressing
Yeah, they'll probably
this
sue.
grievance?
It'll cost more. But, that's not the threat. My basic position is fair. Is it fair what happened to this guy? And even the law director said stinks. Sounds like something I'd say actually. And so that's my only position. I'm not worried about precedent. I guess maybe I should be. That's what Pat was here telling us.
I appreciate the law director's warning, but I still think we should go forward with this.
Thank you.
I think we should right a wrong.
Well, there's two of us now, so that means we can put it on the agenda. And you can vote it down as you please, okay?
Nancy,
Yeah.
I have some concerns as well in the sense that it does stink, and I appreciate you fighting for an employee of the city who has served the community for a number of years, I'm guessing, and I have not had a chance to speak with him. He did leave his number with us on the letter. Having been out of town last weekend, I haven't had a chance to read it until just now. But I guess I might perhaps it might be short-sighted on my part to worry about the future, as Mr. Lang has warned us that it would be worthwhile to consider, but I also think that the moment is of value, and in this sense it would be to right a wrong or to aid or assist a person that is in need or would benefit. So I'm open to this idea or this discussion.
And those of you who have an opinion, talk with one of us or all of us. You know roughly where people stand, and it'll be up for first reading then on Monday. If you have any other
Nancy,
issues out there.
if I may,
Acting Mayor.
acting
Weiss.
mayor, I guess. I too have never learned, Patrick, where angels fear to tread here. And to disagree with my good friend Nancy Bain is never something I relish doing or
You'll be in
want
trouble.
to do. It's never served me well, and I continue to seem to, on occasion, do it. And on this one, I would reiterate everything that the law director has said, but for a couple of other reasons also. Every time I have found myself, and I think most of the people here know that I have ran large organizations with hundreds of employees for 25 years now, and have found myself in multiple hearings with these kind of cases on appeal and otherwise, and almost every time one of the questions that a hearing officer always goes over is, has the person complaining followed every opportunity at redress that they have? So when there are other routes to go, certainly short of this body, that I cannot think of another time that we have had here is an ordinance for this employee ordinance in the last 20 years that I've been here, have we?
I don't think so, but we never had a situation like this, Bill.
Well, and, I would just think that this employee has other redress to go through before coming here. Now, I don't know the specifics on why the union withdrew its grievance. Maybe it was bargained away with something else. I don't know. I do know that workers' comp back injuries are something you better tread on softly, because I've had whole wings on a shift at a nursing home all of a sudden decide they had a back injury. And you cannot prove or disprove somebody has a back injury. And anyone that's ever managed worker comp systems almost never will use the phrase light duty. It's a modified duty. To have somebody on light duty is sure a lot better than somebody having to perform all the different things of their job. So while I have always had a modified duty program and always got everybody back to work as soon as possible and did everything I could to make sure we accommodated the limitations that any physician would say that this person could work under, I don't know what the specifics are here. And because of HIPAA, you're not allowed to know.
Right.
So I would be really, really careful in taking this one on. I really think that legislation that is designed to benefit one person is dangerous. And I really appreciate what you're trying to do. And a legislative individual that is trying to address a wrong, man, that's a noble thing. And trying to make something fair, gosh, that's a good thing. And I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I do agree with the law director in this regard, and I do, representing the administration tonight, do feel it's misguided.
Okay. Any other comments? So workers' comp currently sends people back and we put them on light duty. There have been other firefighters since that time that didn't lose their pension for the time they were laid up, as they say, with a bad back. That's basically a fact that we are dealing with right now. So he is singled out. All right. So enough of my Crusader Rabbit approach. We're going to move on to the next item if no one has anything to say, and that would be Jim. I'll let you do
Some
this.
appropriation comments from the auditor. I think everybody ended up getting a list of these issues that actually Mayor Weil had talked to me last week about some of these, and Kathy Heck, the auditor, was there. The mayor's out of town, so I'm going to ask Auditor Heck to touch on each of these 6 or 8 issues that we need to deal with ordinances next week.
Well, okay, the first one on my list is the additional $100,000 from the general fund to the cap fund for the ladder truck. Council already just last week finished appropriating $100,000 from the cap fund for the ladder truck into cap, from the general fund into cap. And then we've had discussions about the increased revenue from estate taxes this year. And so there were some people who wanted to put another $100,000 in there to get that in a cap line to start building up that money, since it's so much that's needed. And so it's really up to council if you want to go ahead and move that. I did contact the Auditor of State's office and found out that that money does need to be receipted into the general fund and then moved, that we cannot just start putting all of our estate taxes into the cap fund. But we can certainly put it into the general fund and move it as council wishes. So that's up to council if they want that one. I guess I'll go through all of them. And I don't know,
Okay.
did you?
Well, I was just going to
So
say,
what does that mean?
we
No, I mean, where's it going to go? It's going to go into the general fund in a special line?
the money is
appropriated?
in,
Okay.
the receipted estate taxes have already been placed into the general fund.
And we have an account line for estate taxes and have for years because we do get them every year.
Right, and it varies considerably, but I was just worried about the next 100,000. Is it going in as well then to the same place we put the other one? Is that the answer?
Well,
Yes,
that's
I see her.
yeah, that's the suggestion here, yes.
Well,
Okay.
yeah, there was some discussion by Paul of putting it into the general cap fund in case we needed it. Then it would be 580. But no, the last $100,000 went into 580-208, which is the police department in their vehicle
Fire
line.
department.
Or fire department, sorry.
Oh, okay, so that's what we want to do, right?
In their vehicle line.
So
That's
the,
Unappropriated, though, right?
the choice is, do we want to put it in the fire department cap line for the fire truck, which essentially locks it up, or into the general cap line where it could be used for other emergencies. Mayor Abel had suggested a year, maybe 2 years ago, that we earmark all estate receipts for this particular project, this ladder truck that we know is going to be $1.2 million. The auditor is suggesting that we lock up an additional $100,000. So in calendar year 2008, we would have put away a total of $200,000 toward this purchase, which we're looking at in another 3 years. So basically, that's the suggestion.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, next one on my list is, has to do with police uniforms, an additional appropriation of $15,000. I think most everybody here saw the police chiefs, or I don't know who it came from, Captain Powell maybe. They have new officer coming on, and their initial issue, uniform and et cetera, is a little bit costly, plus their other uniform allowances, so that's what that's for. The other one, this one that I want, and I put this in your packet, and we've talked about this before, is the auditor treasurer fees for the county. If you look at the next page in this little packet I gave you, about halfway, right in the middle, 101, 120, 5353, auditor treasurer fees. As you will see that at this point in May, which isn't even quite halfway through the year, we have used up all of our appropriation in that line. And so I would like to we appropriated $24,000 originally for this year. I'd like to appropriate another $25,000 because we aren't quite halfway through the year. Actually, this is just May. And then I added a couple of pages. I killed another tree today, just to let people on council know, aren't familiar with this stuff. These are just samples of the apportionment sheets that we get from the county auditor, and it shows in the middle the deductions that are taken for their fees. And it's certainly based on the amount of money. Sometimes we'll get a $15 manufactured home tax revenue, and they take $1.27 out of it or something like that. But as you see from these 2 pages, there are several fees that come out. These fees are taken out before we even get our money. What we get is the bottom line after the fees. So we have to show that in our system, our records, that we have paid those fees, because in essence we did. Okay. The next one I have on here is the sewer debt fund. Has to do with sewer debt. And as you know, coming July 1st, which would be the next page in here, is debt schedule. We will owe $335,000 for our OWDA loans. And we are doing really well with, we've changed the mix of the money we're putting into the debt fund as opposed to the sewer fund. The issue now is we expect the service charges to cover that, but the problem is we have to start our process for paying this for July 1st before we get our end of June receipts. Okay? You have any questions about that? So we won't, post our receipts for June until a few days after, until we get our information from the utility department. In which time we will have already had to have, written this check, etc. So what I would like to have is permission to borrow, or you can just do a transfer, however you want to word it, up to $20,000 from the general fund into sewer debt, and then it would be transferred back, probably July when the receipts are in and we have, because while the money is appropriated, we know what we have to spend, the actual fund balance is not going to be in there probably. Anybody have any questions about that?
Notice the payment is total of $330,000, and we're waiting for receipts of about $17,000. So this new mix is being very effective in meeting these obligations, but we just need a little boost.
Right. In comparison, we actually figure it's going to be around $17,000, but that's why I said up to 20. If I only need 13, that's certainly all I would want to transfer. It would only be temporary, just to cover that debt. But yes, we think our receipts are going to come in, but as I said, we won't post June receipts until after June 30th, in which time July 1st is the due date for our payment. Okay, next one in here. These two are bookkeeping corrections from my office. 275 is the emergency shelter fund, and this year we found out that we were no longer going to be the pass-through for that grant. We had already appropriated the money for the grant, and so I had council unappropriate it just very recently, 06508. And then when we looked into our system, and I actually kind of thought this, but I couldn't find it when I looked. And so what happened was we had, rather than one payment, we covered for one payment that we knew we would have, but we had two. Fourth quarter payment would always have been in the next year. But we also had a prior year payment that we had to pay. So we need to reappropriate one of our quarterly payments, which is that $14,000 plus. The money is in there, but we, like I said, unappropriated the full amount of the grant. We actually had two payments that we had to make this year. The last one for me is the water fund. And I think this had to do with the fact, the way we appropriated this and the way we have to appropriate notes and rollovers is last year when we were talking about the water fund, we thought we were going to pay this $200,000 note off. But then we transferred money for the red tag fees out of water into sewer, and so they didn't quite have the carryover that we thought. So we appropriated and transferred from the water fund to the water debt fund $207,200 in 04408. In actuality, we already had appropriated the $200,000, and all we really needed was the $7,200 transferred. So I just need to unappropriate or decrease that appropriation by $200,000 and reverse the transfer. So those are bookkeeping issues, the last two. Really, the last three were mine. So that's it for my list. And I put copies of the ordinances in here in case you wanted to see what we did. So, does anybody have any questions about anything?
Very clear. Thank you.
Chris?
I do have one question,
Okay.
Kathy, and this is just my not being as familiar with procedures, but I'm back up to the ordinance of authorizing the loan from the general fund to sewer. I mean, is that because of a standard accounting procedure that you're not allowed, or by auditor's standards, you're not supposed to take that into a negative balance?
Right,
Or-
right.
Okay,
Exactly.
okay.
Legally, we are not allowed to spend money we don't have. What happens is we have money. The city has money in the bank.
Insure and other funds.
But as
right.
far as that fund in our system, that fund accounting keeps everything separate. And so when we appropriate, council appropriates in the beginning of the year, we know we're going to bring in, say, $100,000 in sewer service charges throughout the year, but we won't have all those charges, halfway through the year. And so if we have a bill to pay, the money isn't actually in that fund account line.
Okay, so when the revenues finally do come in, then the
Right.
transfer is made back
Exactly.
from that account back into
And
the
the
general
reason we
fund.
would do that, the only funds that we can really do that with are the general fund and the cap fund. General fund money can be spent anywhere. It doesn't work the other way with almost any other funds. Cap money
Okay.
can be, but, and the general fund has, that much money that they could loan to the sewer fund temporarily. But, yes, you can't just borrow willy-nilly from any one fund to another, as you please. But general fund money can be spent anywhere. Although, just for your information, you should not be subsidizing your other funds with your general fund money.
Right.
The city of Jackson got in trouble for that a couple of years ago.
Especially a proprietary fund.
Exactly.
Okay, thanks.
So
Fund balance.
on Monday,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
it's kind of
Service Safety Director?
I just want to,
An additional request for appropriations.
Okay.
First and foremost is the air conditioning unit at Arts West. That went down over the weekend to a sweltering packed house. It's not going to get any cooler this summer. And
oh, come on. Ye of little hope.
what they provided me with is an estimate from late last fall of $15,500, and been told to increase that by 20%. Or it's just a simple replacement of the air conditioning unit at Arts West. I don't know if you want to speak more to that, Ken?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it, Paula, for bringing this up. I didn't know if you were going to or if I was going to. I did speak with Miss Emily Prince regarding this past weekend, and they did have a couple performances in which the air conditioning was not working sufficiently and actually began to become problematic and it was leaking on the floor, thus being a hazard potentially for the thespians on the stage and or future performances in which there could be electrical equipment on the stage if there was musicians performing. So I do think this is very pertinent and relevant, and there is a performance, the Ohio Valley Summer Theater has a contract with the city, with the Arts West, in which they will be performing there this summer, and I believe in 2 weeks, if I have that correct.
They're there rehearsing tonight.
Okay.
They invite you to switch places.
Thank you, Mr.
This one
Williams.
isn't that hot either.
I know, but compared to there, oh my.
So I do think this is very relevant and needed. So basic upgrade. I think there's been efforts made to fix the old system that is there in place, and to no avail. It's still not operating correctly. Hence the request for a new system.
I would ask that also, if we can
Jim, are you
identify
gonna call?
where the
We were
emergency
just
clause,
talking.
I'm sorry, I couldn't
having
hear
an
you.
emergency clause.
Without
Correct.
formal bidding and all of that too, right?
Well, you gotta be below.
Isn't that right?
But, Auditor?
I just wanted to add a couple things because I've been working with Rich and Emily and the mayor on the recreation budget, which includes, and Ken, which includes Arts West budget. In our discussions, Emily has applied for actually 3 grants already and is planning to apply for another one to try to get this paid for. The 2 of them, they were turned down. She's going to ask if there's a discretionary fund attached to the state cap budget. And so she has been trying to find this money elsewhere, and it might happen. But in the meantime, I think we all know how hot it's been. So, but I just think she should be given credit, and that she's not just, expecting us to come up with the money, that she's trying, but they were turned down by Oblenis, and as I said, the state cap budget wasn't put in there. She's applied to the Governor's Office of Appalachia this past weekend and is going to apply to Buckeye Hills Development District Office. And so she's still trying. So,
What time frame? You're asking for emergency
I
clause?
would be asking, I understand that she has done this in the
Yeah.
efforts, and we even have a trail and history of her applying for grants. But with grants, then we'd probably be in September by the time we'd be able to put air conditioning in there. And I just feel that it's an immediate need. It is our facility.
And so that's my question. What time, with this ordinance, you're asking for an emergency clause, but I assume you're also going to ask for suspension, whatever we can do to expedite this.
Just make it happen on Monday
But
night.
if we make it happen on
Install
Monday, is this
Tuesday.
guy prepared to start work on Tuesday?
What we'll probably request is a couple other quotes, is what have been advised, and then choose.
And my guess is no heating, air conditioning guy has this size stuff in stock. They almost always come from Columbus or, shipped in from somewhere else. So,
But we'll do our part.
Get the money.
If council
Get the
so
money down.
chooses.
Yes.
I'm not quite sure who to address this to, but, and I don't think there's an official policy of the city now, but looking at the long-term costs and environmental impacts, do we know the efficiency of what is going to be put in, or if it's Energy Star rated?
That's a good point.
And I assume that we don't right now, and I don't want to hold this up. And I wouldn't hold it up, but I would ask that be somehow examined in terms of the cost and long-term cost of efficient units.
It's been reported to the AMAC, Municipal Arts Commission, that there was an energy audit. It was, in fact, the first city building that went through a full energy audit. The theater itself has been well insulated. When we went through the renovation, the basement is well insulated. They recommended an additional insulation into the ceiling the actual roof of the building, and there's a plan for that and an estimate for that. I believe it's in the neighborhood of $4,000. That would finish, as I understand it, as it has been presented to AMAC and to the advisory council out there, that would bring it up to date with the best that that organization is advising at this point.
And Mr. Winters is speaking as a board member, correct?
Yes,
For
I am
Arts West.
both on the Arts West Advisory Board, and Leslie is the president, I'm the vice president of the Arts Commission.
Thank you for the information on the building. I appreciate the fact that Arts West is becoming a lot more efficient, and I know it's an aging building and everything that's being done is really necessary. I was speaking simply about the air conditioning unit itself.
Go.
A lot of commercial compressors for HVAC or air conditioning systems do not have Energy Star ratings, as similarly to residential units. But I think there are different levels of efficiency that can be spec'd out depending on what type of compressor you're going to purchase.
I was just going to say, if Emily were to get a grant and we receive that money, we can always receipt that. You can put that in your ordinance that we receipt that back into whatever fund you decide to appropriate the money from.
Okay.
Good idea. Christine?
Just a question, I'm assuming that there are rehearsals still going on with no air conditioning, and just concerned if there's anything that we can do in between now and then.
You're volunteering your house.
Move the couches aside, I know. It is, it's just a concern, especially with the production coming so quickly.
I was there Saturday night during some of the worst of it last weekend. I attended the performance. And it's true, it was raining in there from the thing. They have partially fired up. The heroes in this are all the city maintenance people who've done a wonderful job of trying to keep this thing going. And one has to applaud George and the people that are working with him. They've got it going so that it's not totally unusable now. We wouldn't be having people in there if there was a serious health problem. They've got the doors open. We aren't into lights at all until this weekend, the heavy lighting thing. If we can get some air conditioning in there right away, we open a week from this weekend. We can't, it was dangerous in there last weekend with the audience. Emily came in on her own time so that we would have 2 trained people in audience safety and CPR and all those things in residence because we had a full house. Totally.
Okay, thank you. Anything else?
Yes.
Of course.
The Athens Fire Department is requesting $5,000 for a backup generator for their repeater system they have up at the tower site. What we have in place is a 2-hour backup system. That's not necessarily enough when you're talking about the fire department. And he's priced that through the same company that provides him to the 911 call center.
Is that a price level that we would normally
If
Do
we're
you-
asking for additional appropriation.
asking for additional appropriation? Okay.
How much is left in the fund?
I don't-
Can we replace it over time slowly? And
Kathy, what is the fund balance for that?
5,000 isn't very much.
I know. Sorry, is that fire department?
Yeah.
So don't make
The
them
fund
wait,
balance
just let them
report.
buy it.
While we're
Oh.
looking,
Okay.
under the Athens Fire Department, we received no bids for the emergency repair, structural repair. So Jay Maiden, the president of Maiden and Jenkins, met on site with the engineers and George, myself, and has provided quotes for the work of up to $47,000. I don't have the original appropriation in front of me that was done fairly early back in the year. That was about 50-some thousand to include the cost of the engineering consultants and the structural repair. I'm thinking, excuse me, this is $18,000 to $20,000 additional dollars. That will be a prevailing wage job, labor, materials.
So should we wait till you have a pretty clear
Well,
idea?
I can give that information during the week, it's just that I don't have it tonight. This is the committee meeting, I wish to discuss it. So.
And then we'll find out more about the fund, about the generator. Is it something that we can buy? And we'll see.
Fire department, you
Yeah.
need the backup for the repeater?
Is that,
Is that what you're talking
okay.
about?
And the structural repairs.
And then the
But that
structural
we'll have to do a little research. And Andy, was there something for the Groves Road? Fire repairs, the structural.
The ordinance that passed for the,
Andy, why don't you join us up here so the microphone can pick you up?
the ordinance that passed recently, forgive me, I don't know the exact number, for the Grosvenor Slip Repair project had $34,000 authorized to expend on engineering for the Grosvenor Slip Repair. There was nothing appropriated for it. We've been able to, perhaps there was an oversight or we identified somewhere else that we thought had appropriated funds, and by 7.2 we were going to take that out of. But I'd like to get an appropriation as well so that we can actually have the engineers and we get started on the design for that.
Okay, so that, we can do that, talk about that next Monday also. The list is long. That's it? Acting Mayor?
Just a question, I'm going to show some of my own ignorance on this one. The fire station itself, just how much of an emergency is that work? Totally necessary and how quick? And I know I'm blindsiding you with this, but I'm asking council members that may be more aware of it than I am, because
We did some work, we funded some work last year. And this is, the engineers have discovered that more needs to be done. But
Familiar with that, Bill?
the Service Safety Director has the information.
The Phase 2 structural repairs will be underneath the office and living quarters of the fire department. The first phase was underneath where the fire trucks are, but they have some failing concrete structures, and that's what we're going to be reinforced, placed in there. And as far as the emergency part of it, it should have been done by now. We went through the whole bidding process and everything to get it done.
Okay.
And with an emergency repair, it probably wasn't necessary.
Okay. There'll be quite a list of things to talk about again on next Monday.
Okay. So,
Um,
budget planning, right?
Yeah, now we're going to talk about 2009 budget planning. I think Member Bain wants us to talk about that, and I just wanted to explain our thought process. This is June already. You know, the second half of the year is approaching, is here. And from experience, we know that this second half flies by. We usually schedule August off, and so we come back in September and we're faced with
Halloween.
Halloween, and that is all encompassing, and we don't do anything until after that. And so we would really like to begin the consideration for budget issues soon. And Member Bain has a couple suggestions.
I have a handout, and I intend to do this next time we meet for water and sewer or some other two funds, and just to, I think most of us lack a clear understanding of where the money comes from. I mean, this is definitely paid for by the users, a user fee generated fund. I used 2006 because I had a complete run of information on that. And the one thing that I think is interesting is that we are, in 2006, we generated less money than we are going to expend on our contract next year, which is why we raised the rates. But notice that recycling charges roughly about a fourth of the cost, and then special hauls ends up being pretty small, but service charge is about half. And then you have some other different things that are added together into it to come up with the total. And I used Excel, and I hope to God I didn't add 2006 to it. And then the expenditure pattern, you have the contract taking most of the money, supplies, software. It generated a series of questions that I pursued with the auditor's office, services, and personnel. Some small part of this is we're paying part of a salary out of this fund, but there is no money going right now from the garbage fund into internal service. This is much more complex than because we have hired, that's why 2006 is the basis, but we have now the garbage litter control person out of this fund, and that's what's going on here. So revenue expenditures, you can take a look at it and see if there's anything in there you want to go over, look at, consider at a future meeting. And I have a series of questions. The supplies that we paid out for $23,000 included recycling bins. Services at that time included Athens County Health Department and intern and mailing. And I made a note that I'd like to know the real cost of having an outside agency do the mailing. Household hazardous waste program is something that we did before and got a lot of kudos for, and should we be doing it next year? Litter control. And then the other thing, and I know this is mainly directed toward the large big picture here, and I just thought maybe we could look at two things, 2003, 2007. 2003, I converted everything to tons. As you can see, in 2007, January through December, in most cases, our recycling tonnage was down, with the exception of clear glass, iron, and mingled plastic. Everything else, we were collecting less in 2007 than we did in 2003, for whatever reason. My explanation could easily be that aluminum is 75 cents a pound. Why wouldn't you take it yourself and redeem it if you had financial shortcomings or whatever? But anyway, so this is what we generated at the curbside. We had 24 tons of aluminum. It's paying about $1,493. At least this is what Cindy Sharp told me, for $35,000. This didn't come to us. This pays. What we have is a very and I want to make sure we all understand this. We have a system that relies on a very small kind of $250 per unit per year for individuals, but all the people picking it up and processing it are paid by selling the materials. And that's part of this kind of balanced situation we have going on. And then you can take a look at amber brown glass, one of our largest items. I can't imagine where we're getting all that brown glass from, huh? And it's going for $25 a ton, and $8,000 was generated. Clear glass, not so much. Iron, you can see. Scrap metal. Scrap metal is up. The Habitat made quite a bit of money last year on it. Steel cans. Mingled plastic is up. Cardboard, always a winner of $104 a ton. It could be even more than that. And I'd like you all to notice that cardboard, you can buy 2 tons of coal or cardboard. They're about the same amount of money. It's kind of amazing. And the coal just creates a problem in the environment. The cardboard cleans up, comes back to us in cereal boxes. Magazine, newspapers, you can see all the different tonnage. And one of the things that I think is important, the sorted office is there for $160 a ton. That's what we're getting, and they're getting, and that's why we can employ 20-some odd people out there doing the work. And you can see there's the amount that was generated. The shipped column, and this is very important, includes a broker fee and shipping. So once it's all baled and at the curb, the materials are not worth that much sitting at the curbside, but collecting them, putting together in a bale means that they're worth more money. And if Oahu feels like I'm being didactic, I think I am. But what I'm trying to talk about is if we commingle, then it won't be going out at this price. It's going to be going out at $5 a ton. And we're going to be carrying it out. I mean, that's like the Atibi system that they have in some other parts of the state. We can debate that later on, I just had to say it. All right, then my other thing is on the back side, and this is not budget planning, but this is something we started 6 months ago. 6 months have passed. This is something I participated in earlier. 11-189, we funded a study on policy and procedures manual, and I would like to encourage the administration to come back with, and maybe sometime talk to us about use of city vehicles more explicitly and maybe prune out some of those Crown Vics. But that's just my own personal hobby horse. But, you know, the larger picture about vehicles, where you can see how really scrawny the use of city vehicles is. I know in the larger entity to the south of us, I wouldn't have dreamed of taking a vehicle out of the county or even off campus on a field trip without clearing it, without stating it, without explicitly stating where I was going, how much miles I was doing, what my principal activity was. You know, so no, there, you know, absolutely, I think we need to. If we're using public money, we need to introduce accountability, which is absent in this old CNA policy and procedure manual. And so I don't know how it happens. I don't think council should be doing it. But I do think we need to have a differentiation between in-transit and out-of-town transit and more accountability to the voters, to the taxpayers, to the users. So I know it's 6 months. We talked about it earlier, and that's just my hobby horse back. Any questions? Debbie, quit laughing at me. Debbie laughs at me way too much. Miscellaneous. Okay?
Nancy,
Yeah.
probably the only person left in this room that was around when you started.
I didn't start it alone. Rex
You
Scott
worked
did.
awfully hard, and you led council to start the first curbside recycling
Guy
pickups.
Phillips, Rex
You and
Scott.
Guy and others, I do maintain that you were the guiding spirit on starting the first curbside recycling pickup in the state. And it is more than a little bit disheartening to see, you know, these numbers drop off. And I'd really like to see somehow some more discussion, hopefully, that ends up with how can we get people to start feeling as good about recycling today as they did back then? Because I do know that people kind of went to it kicking and screaming, and in no time flat really felt good about what they were doing. And at a time that we are all trying to feel so green about what we do, these numbers I don't think can all be explained away by anything short of maybe we're getting a little lazy in not making sure that it gets where it needs to be. And I know I may have been one of those people on some of it, but these numbers speak loudly, and I
We're
really
missing your
hope...
aluminum cans, Bill?
No, I
12
don't
tons?
throw many of those away, but
Natty
no,
Light?
I'm not responsible for that much of it. But, you know, if all of us threw just a couple of things away that we should recycle because it's easy and quick, that's what's had to happen here. Now, we can explain some of it away with a few of the things that you've said, but I think a lot of it has to come down to we've gotten a little lazy, and we need to really make sure that people realize that the solid waste stream is getting worse, and it's kind of like oil. The places that we have to put this stuff is running out, and the cost of opening up new ones, which is always what led us to this program to begin with, in addition to energy savings. I remember somebody saying you can fill up a aluminum can halfway with gasoline, and that's how much energy it takes to make a new aluminum can. And it takes hardly anything to melt that one down and remold a new aluminum can. So, I don't know. We need to somehow figure out how to beat this drum some more.
Maybe the cable guys can help us. I don't know. Other people have ideas. I also want to, before we go any further, not to take any kind of credit for this, because recycling in this town started as a grassroots effort. It was started by people like Tom O'Grady, Ed Newman, Donna Goodman, Bob Eichenberg. They were in their salad days, and they were out at the mall collecting stuff with Project Sort. And so I think, you know, all of us have participated, but you have to give those guys credit. Let me just start with that. talk away.
There's an Uptown Business Association meeting in this room Wednesday morning at 8:30. A speaker will be talking about Uptown revitalization, and also the Clean Committee will be talking about their proposal for recycling in the Uptown area, which has been sorely slipping recently. So they have some solid suggestions for that recycling program to start in September. So I think all council members should have received an email. If you haven't checked your email yet, like me, there's an invitation there to attend this meeting at 8:30.
You're telling us to check emails.
Somebody called me face to
The
face.
rich irony that is before us with that.
I didn't see it, but I heard it's there.
It said Uptown revitalization, and I thought, oh no, streetscape again. And I just said, no way, I'm not going.
Yeah.
Number 3, that would be round number 3. I'm not.
Yeah, that's part of it, but you have to sit through that to get to the recycling part.
Okay.
But we'll hear more about recycling anyway, so.
Are there ideas on beating the drum?
Yeah, Chris?
Chris, I can't.
Well, I just also wondered about the recycling at the larger apartment complexes, because I've been in communication with Paula about an apartment complex that stopped recycling
Yes.
7 months ago.
Yes.
And
The students
so that's
complained.
right, and that was a student who reported it to me. So,
Yeah.
I'm wondering, maybe that's
Clearly
some of it,
something
too.
that should be
Yeah,
happening.
and I too have heard similar concerns about the larger apartment complexes struggling with the recycling programs. And I think a lot of it, I'm guessing, is education and then developing a pattern or a routine. Most of us are creatures of routine or pattern, and if we can get in that pattern or educate and help communicate how to create that routine that'll behoove the city and help the recycling cause. I'm also thinking that, as Mr. Sands presented to us, that Wednesday's meeting will be helpful. And I think that, I'm sure that the city or in assisting some of the business owners uptown or the bars, that might benefit recycling as well. I don't know how well or how they're doing with recycling. I know they use a lot of glass, and that might be something that we may want to help encourage them to consider and look at or aid in that process. Because I'm sure that there's a lot there that's not getting recycled and being thrown out instead.
Yes. You're right. They do it some of them do it as a practice. So take your beer bottles home.
Anything else, Member Bain?
Nope, I'm done.
I have no miscellaneous. We
done our
can move on to
miscellaneous.
transportation.
Okay. First agenda item is the Richland Avenue 682 intersection plans, and you all received a cost estimate in your mailboxes today, and I think also electronically by email from Debbie. And we have Street Director Stone, Andy Stone, with us here tonight, so I'll turn it over to you.
Good live.
Can you guys hear me? Got a prepared statement tonight for this one. Ladies and gentlemen of Athens City Council, thank you for having me this evening. I come before you to request your consideration for funding the design engineering for the redesign of the Richland Avenue 682 intersection and the repair of the Richland Avenue Bridge over the Hocking River. The current bridge was built in 1969. The majority of the bridge substructure and superstructure is still in good condition. However, the concrete deck is deteriorating rapidly due to high traffic, extensive stop-start motion, and a great deal of road salt. In 1997, an investigation was conducted as to the status of the deck, including 8 corings at various locations. The results of that investigation yielded that if a microsilica overlay was installed immediately, similar to the treatment on the Stimson Bridge, we could arrest the deterioration. This action was not taken for whatever reason, and now 11 years later, the bridge is rated as structurally deficient and requires a redecking. In 2006, the city applied for and was awarded a federal municipal bridge grant since the bridge was rated a 4 out of 9 on ODOT's bridge scale. The intersection project has been discussed long before I came into my current position in the city. It has never been an ideal situation, with a high-speed rural highway intersecting a heavy traffic 25-mile-per-hour city street at an odd angle. But the problem became more pronounced with increase in size of the city and OU population in the 1990s. The serious consideration of this problem by the city started in 2000 by City Council with Ordinance O-44-00, which was the approval of the final plat of the University Courtyard Apartments. Here's a quote from that ordinance. Whereas Athens City Council will initiate planning for implementation of recommended improvements to the Richland Avenue State Route 682 intersection, including traffic signaling, pedestrian and bicycle traffic, and potential roadway improvements. ODOT got involved shortly thereafter. In 2003, this intersection was identified as 78th on Ohio's high crash list. As a result, ODOT funded an intersection safety study, which was then updated in 2005, identifying the need for safety improvements. This study and the ranking earned the city a federal safety grant to improve this intersection. Since then, the intersection has fallen off the statewide high crash list. But the funding was already programmed, so we will still receive the money if we move forward on this project. To ensure there was someone to shepherd the process, the former administration waited until I returned from Iraq at the end of 2006 to move forward on this project. Upon my return, I determined the bridge and intersection were closely related and convinced ODOT to synchronize our two federal grants into one project. In 2007, we created a 7-member selection committee consisting of me, Ray Hazlett, Pam Callahan of OU, Amy Flowers of City Council, Delia Rapp of the Southside Neighborhood Association, Amanda Estock of the OU Student Senate, and Tom Wolf, a prominent area cyclist. This committee followed Ohio's qualifications-based selection law, conducting an exhaustive review of 17 engineering firms to select a consultant to move forward. Last year, this body appropriated $200,000 for preliminary engineering. To date, we've spent $165,000 of that conducting detailed traffic studies, preliminary surveys, environmental analysis, alternative development, and seeking extensive public input on the project. The citizen requests during this public involvement process, environmental clearance costs, and construction cost inflation resulted in approximately $1.5 million more in improvements than the 2005 safety study recommendation suggested, primarily with regards to pedestrian and bicycle safety. Because of that, I recently applied to ODOT for a third federal grant under the Transportation Enhancement Program. We should get an answer on or about 1 August. As this is paired with an already programmed project, ODOT District 10 personnel believe we will be successful. Once the Transportation Enhancement Grant is awarded, the City of Athens will potentially be the recipient of over $4.5 million in federal transportation money. $4.5 million. I say potentially because we will only receive it if we go through with the project. It is not free money. The program requires a certain amount of local match. That is, we must pay completely for the design engineering and normally 20% of construction. Primarily because of the National Environmental Policy Act of 1969, there are a large number of strings attached to this federal money, driving up the upfront cost of design. For a project this size, NEPA requires an 8-step project development process which involves extensive public involvement, right-of-way clearance, environmental review, and alternative analysis in addition to a set of plans and specs. All of this is expensive and is included in the locally funded portion. That is how the Federal Highway Administration and ODOT prevent communities who are not serious about their projects from grabbing at big highway dollars. I've provided, in the document you received today, the best estimate I can to date for you for the entire cost of the project. There is no doubt this is expensive at nearly $6.3 million. Inflation and contingencies have been built into this estimate, so we should not be surprised when the time comes for construction. Our share could be as high as $1.7 million, which we will pay for over 4 years, and $165,000 of this is already spent, getting us through the initial portions. I have submitted a 5-year capital projects transportation plan to the mayor and Chris Nisley as the transportation chair. I believe our revenue in the 225, 226, and 572 fund lines can support this project as well as several others. Tonight, I'm asking you to consider funding the rest of the design costs for this project. The consultant's proposal is $707,000, which is higher than my original cost estimates of $350,000 to $500,000. My original estimate fell short because the project grew due to needs identified by the public and environmental consultant during the preliminary engineering over the last year. We reached this amount of $707 after recent hard negotiations with the consultant where they eventually lowered their price by $30,000. As the design engineering will take place over 2008 and 2009, we can fund this over 2 years with $425,000 this year and $282,000 next year. Tonight I am asking you to begin authorization and appropriation of the $425,000. ODOT recommends, and I still plan, on requesting a proposal from the second place engineering firm on our selection list for comparison. But I do not expect massive differences, and I want to get the ball rolling on the appropriations for design. Our recently conducted preliminary engineering studies yielded the Richland 682 intersection sustained 73 crashes over the last 4 years, for a rate of 2.36 per million vehicles entering the intersection. A, quote, safe intersection has a rate less than 1. The vast majority of these are rear-end crashes due to the signal and congestion, but quite a few of our more serious, including our recent fatality, have been side impact. This is by far the most dangerous intersection in our city. This project is a chance to fix that. 3 of our 6 bridges that we maintain are rated structurally deficient. This project is an opportunity to fix one of those. You and I both have heard from countless citizens that they want a better way to bike and walk between the center city and the south side, crossing the river in 682. This project is a chance to show our commitment to walkability and bikeability as set forth in our comprehensive plan. Lastly, given that all 3 grants are coming together at once, this is perhaps the only chance in our lifetimes to create the premier gateway of any city in the region, or perhaps the entire state. We do not want to turn away $4.5 million. I realize this is a big financial commitment, which can be frightening, but I believe the need is great, and our budget can support, as well as perform, other improvements around the community. So I implore you to vote to fund this project. Thank you for the time to speak this evening, and I'll take any questions you have.
Thank you, Street Director Stone. Yes, and thanks for being here, presenting the information, and then we also, as he mentioned, have income estimates for the street funds that he has checked in consultation with the city auditor, Kathy Hecht. So does anybody have any questions that they'd like to address to Andy or Paula or Kathy? Kent.
Sure, thank you. I'll just say briefly, thank you, Mr. Stone. It was a very well put together presentation, and I appreciate all the homework you did in presenting to us today. And thank you also for applying for that 3rd grant, which I think was primarily intended to aid bicycle and pedestrian safety. Was that
right?
Correct. Well, I appreciate that. And, I think that's definitely, as you mentioned and alluded to, part of the comprehensive plan. Good intended. So I appreciate that, and just want you to know that I'm glad that you're able to put all this together for us and present tonight.
Yes.
Andy, just a quick one. Could you at least send on to me your comments tonight, email them?
Sure.
Do you have those?
Sure.
As we get questions from people, I would like to become more familiar with all the different amounts
Absolutely.
and items, and if other council members would like that also.
Yes. Nancy.
First question, have we received the $35,000 from Ohio University?
Ohio University contracted directly with Burgess and Nyquist for costs associated with everything north of the of the Schaefer Street, Richland Avenue
Does that mean
intersection.
they're going to pay for them too?
I don't know that that means they're going to pay for improvements in that section, but at this point, everything south of Schaefer Street to Dairy Lane is the project boundaries for these 3 grants. The area north, back when we were going through the preliminary engineering on this, I saw as an area that lots of citizens have concerns about, and I thought it pertinent to go ahead and combine the two areas to look at together to create one plan. At some point in the future, fairly near future, we're going to need to do something about the Oxbow Bridge as well. So it made sense from a planning perspective to work in that area. All work that the consultant did north of Schaefer Street, or from Schaefer Street north, was paid for by Ohio University via a purchase order to them for $35,000.
When I basically jumped up and down and insisted on OU paying, I thought they were going to pay for us to do it. But anyway, be that as it may. My second set of questions comes from my East State experience, and specifically, I'm not sure it was this engineering firm, but they encountered a problem with the water lines, and this is after, East State has its issues, the fact the street isn't crowned as well as it could be, and there are puddles in the turn lane. But the other problem is, we were told that the water lines were redesigned to go 90-degree angles around the catch basin, and so we had to come up with some extra money to remedy that solution that the engineering firm that was organized around the transit thing came up with. So that's your background information. So my question is, and I'd like from you assurances on two items, Andy. Number one is that the siphon chamber will not be adversely affected. And that means, you make the choices, I think, as you are interacting with the engineering firm. We don't. But the siphon chamber is a low-tech, well-functioning sewer system appurtenance that moves materials without electricity. And, I guess that in the heat of designing this super great thing, I want to make sure that you remember that we need it. A pump station is going to cut it, okay? We talked about this before, but I just want to make sure we're out in public talking about it one more time.
My understanding is that the siphon chamber is in the vicinity of the Stop and Cop, Richland Avenue, significantly south of the southern limit to this project.
Stop and Cop is the southern limit, isn't it? That's the entrance to University Courtyard end.
We looked at that area as part of the preliminary engineering with the traffic study, and considered the traffic both from University Courtyard and the proposed Summer Coats Run, and program that traffic into the traffic that would flow through the intersection. But as far as limits of construction, Dairy Lane is the southern boundary.
Okay, so there is no way that you're going to come back to us with any adverse effects on the siphon chamber.
There's no way I'm going to come back to you with that.
That's what I wanted to hear. Thank you very much. Okay, the second thing is, when we were talking the last time, and I also asked about John Wilhelm Park, but I've given up on that one. OU land. And this is being done because OU, we have a rush minute, 15 minutes either sides of 8 and 5. And it's going to command a lot of money. And so I guess in the spirit of shared responsibility, I hope that when this small amount of state land that you're almost certain, maybe you're going to avoid it, but that they will donate it as opposed to asking us for money, especially after we do the improvements and say, oh, it's worth so much more because it's so much more accessible now. So I hope we're not going to buy land from them, from the state.
The assumptions that we made when we prepared this estimate, that's myself in conjunction with the consultant, was that no money would be paid for transfer of property on this. The right-of-way cost would be zero. The right-of-way clearance cost, that is to say the ODOT pre-qualified real estate experts and the surveyors to draw up the right-of-way plans for any new right-of-way due to takes, that is to say areas that were not previously designated as transportation right-of-way that are going to turn into transportation right-of-way. The cost associated with drawing up those plans is significant, and it's simply because of NEPA.
That's
but the cost of the land itself, in my estimate to date, and I certainly can't speak for Ohio University, but every inkling that I'm getting from them working with them on this project is this is a desirable project for OU, and they wouldn't want to do anything to stand in the way.
Okay, because I'm glad to hear that as of now there are no land costs. All right, my last question has to do with construction engineering. It's $500,000. How many times would Burgess and Nyepel be here? And how many actual? It's 10%. Do we pay it no matter what? Or what's going on there?
Construction engineering
I mean, I know what it is, but I want to know about this particular thing, $500,000.
Right. First of all, Burgess and
It's down
Nyepel
the road.
cannot legally perform construction engineering on this project if they remain the consultant for design. That's a rule that ODOT put in place several years ago due to conflicts of interest with designers covering up flaws during construction. So now firms require, the state and federal government requires local authorities to hire separate consultants for the administration and the construction engineering than they hired for design. That being said, ODOT has a cookie cutter 10% figure that they use for construction that's programmed into all the grant requests. And that 10% figure is for construction engineering. That's under the assumption that the city government or township government or county government, whoever is administering the project locally, is not going to be capable of administering the project to the standard required. That is to say, keeping track of the huge amounts of documentation,
Checking
material
the
tickets,
concrete.
and specification, everything that occurs during construction. You got to bring on a panel of experts to do that. Technically, the City of Athens, because I work here, can do construction engineering without contracting that out. Because being a registered professional engineer in Ohio, I can ultimately approve of change orders and such that would be required. That being said, this is a pretty massive project which would command a huge amount of time. I do believe that we are going to require some type of outside help during the construction phase of this project. I don't believe that $500,000 is what we're going to pay for that. I just put that figure in so again it looked like more now, and then later said, nah, it's not going to be that much. Additionally, we are funded 80% of that. The grants cover construction and construction engineering costs. That's not an out-of-pocket expense completely, although we should be able to lower that.
So you sort of alluded to that, but that's what got me thinking about what you were actually talking about. So basically what you're talking about is either you or somebody you hire, but not Burgess and Nyepel actually doing the construction engineering. Is that, I mean, not that I would hold you to it, but is that kind of what you said?
That's exactly what I said.
Okay,
Yes.
good, great. All right. Anybody else have any stupid questions to ask?
Sure.
I did mine.
Councilmember Butler.
Good.
I can't think at the moment about public art and money that goes into with new building processes. Is that just buildings, or is that along with roads? I can't recall the.
Is water and sewer exempted, but our streets for the community art?
I'm not sure. I'm asking, I guess.
We'll have to ask.
I'm not sure. We could check. Certainly a good
I know
question.
water and sewer exempted, but I don't know about streets.
Yeah.
How about tags on the bridge?
Special bridge.
There's actually a component of this project. We assume that aesthetics is going to be fairly important
Yes.
with this project and how you incorporate public art. The consultant did put, as part of their design cost, a workshop specifically with the landscape architect and whoever in the community is going to participate as far as in the artistic side of the design with this. Now, I do believe that outside, I think I remember reading the legislation, and I thought that streets were exempted as well from the 1% for art. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're doing this without an eye towards aesthetics. And I think probably, local as opposed to, locally produced as opposed to, somewhere outside. But I do understand that's going to be important. That's going to be a debated, what will this look like, is going to be a debated part, and art is kind of in the eye of the beholder. I'm an engineer, so I will do my best to allow.
Rub the other side of your head.
And I'll go ahead and say this for the record. My idea was if we did a roundabout, that we would have a giant bobcat looking up.
Oh, God.
And
But
you've
Pam
done
Callahan,
so well.
Tell this.
Pam Callahan from OU told me that's why you're an engineer. And, so no, that's in complete jest. I do realize it's going to be an important component of this project.
Thank you.
Yes.
Nancy, I've got one question. The south side part there, did we not get that expanded because when East State Street was widened and we lost part of the
To the,
federal park that we got out there, that we had to find
along the storm
replacement
sewer,
park?
along the Dairy Lane storm sewer and out to the shuffleboard courts.
Yeah,
That's what we added, right?
so we have no chance of losing any of that then?
No.
Okay.
There is the potential for park impact, and that's something that we've identified early on in this project because of, under NEPA, again, you've got a section 4F, which is very specific about transportation projects impacting parkland.
We know that one very well.
I'm
East
sure-
State
We
Street.
had a major holdup on
8
East State
years.
Street because of it, probably a year.
Right, and I,
No,
and I,
8.
this is something.
Sarah wouldn't.
Well, it was a tremendous amount of
We'll get
holdup.
around this. They
Yeah.
kept saying, ho, ho, ho.
Uh-huh. So
Yeah.
we don't want that to happen.
We put it very early on in the early environmental documents that we put forward to ODOT and required for them to review and Federal Highway to review. The fact that we're tackling it early on, the angle that we're going to take with this as far as getting it cleared through those, and this is considered a CE2, which if you really want to get into the details of the clearance process in NEPA, I can do that for you. Probably shouldn't do it here. But to ensure that the folks that are required to sign off at a CE2 level are comfortable, one of the angle that we're going to take is that this project will actually become an asset to the park. That is to provide access for folks from the northern part and the central part of the city to the park easier than they currently have as they walk south or drive south or bike south. We can actually have access off of the area. And so that's supposed to offset any land that would be taken. Additionally, we talked about, just to ensure that the parkland wasn't touched or minimally touched, is that if we have to build some small retaining walls in that area to keep construction out of that space, that we can incorporate that into the design.
Just to clarify, though, when you do a NEPA clearance, the city says that there's no significant impact, right?
Right.
I mean, it's all the best comes together, and the mayor says it in the paper, and that's the way it is done.
Right, and but the person who signs off on the expenditure of the federal
Further
dollars
up.
has to
I
review
agree.
your justification for saying it's no significant impact.
No, I just wanted everyone to understand that the decision is made at the city level.
local
and then
level, correct.
And everybody looks at it after that.
Any other questions? Yes, Councilmember
The title,
Simmons.
Andy, the title of your worksheet says Richland Avenue cost, assuming alternative B. What's alternative B?
Alternative B was the alternative that incorporated the roundabout design, as well as the non-widening of the Richland Avenue Bridge.
Is that a safe assumption that that's where we're going? Or?
The first two stages of the PDP process are complete. At the end of the second stage of the PDP process, ODOT and FHWA expect you to select an alternative. Most of the evaluation criteria that we used in judging the two alternatives that we created either came out as neutral or favoring alternative B. Specifically, safety with crashes, number one. Number two, environmental impacts. And number three, cost. And that alternative B was significantly cheaper than alternative A because it didn't require a widening or an additional structure to be built into the road.
I'd just like to add a number 4 to that. I really have concerns about the impact on pedestrian and bicycle traffic in that area with alternative B, but there is a huge component of planning for those issues included here, so I hope that that's effective.
And I understand that completely. I know that there's been concern, specifically with alternative B, in moving all ped and bike traffic to one side of the bridge and creating a multi-use path. I know that's been a concern. We have had some residents say they prefer to have the option to go on either side. The reason we did that specifically in that particular alternative was to eliminate the not necessarily the river crossing, but the 682 crossing on the eastern side of the Richland 682 intersection. What we got from the pedestrians and cyclists who came to all of our public meetings or to our public and made their comments said that they often felt most vulnerable crossing on that side due to the traffic coming on off the ramp. Our thought was if we could spend our design effort, and our money in providing a very effective pedestrian conveyance on the west side of both the bridge and the intersection, that you provide a very nice facility and folks will use it. And and that was our thought with that. Additionally, the way to get from one side to the other, we thought on both sides of the bridge, we would improve the existing access underneath the bridge so that folks can quickly get from one side to the other. And that's another component of alternative B.
Any other questions?
Just one real quick question,
Law
if I
Director
might.
Lang.
Andy, I'm just wondering, have there been any studies done as far as with the traffic volume for the high volume events such as move-in weekend, football, basketball games, things like that, and what sort of impact that might have on the egress from those kinds of events?
Both of the alternatives that were developed, both the traditional signalized design, which required the widening of the bridge and the traffic signal, and the roundabout design, which did not require the widening of the bridge, were modeled with 2030 peak hour traffic, and that's based on a 0.5% growth rate. So that's just the common traffic that we modeled it on. However, we also, using a program called VISIM, which is a simulation software that assigns behavior to different vehicles and drives the vehicles through the simulator. There's a couple examples of that right now on the city website. We've taken and increased the volumes on particular legs to deal with, or to look at high traffic events, that is to say football events, as well as move in, move out. It appears as though it's not going to be a problem, not any more than the current intersection. That is to say, you might require an officer for control on very, very heavy volume situations, but for the most part, it hasn't been, it didn't look as though it would break down. One of the things that Burgess and Kneippel said that they'll do, and we still haven't done this yet, is that they would bring the computer that has the program on it with the simulation down, and sit down with the police chief and police captain and go through increasing volumes based on a standard OU football game or a standard OU with some assumptions made about parking and drivers, and let them actually look at it and watch it operate on the model. We haven't done that yet.
Great, thank you. It's been a very informative presentation.
Any other questions? No. Councilmember Bain.
I just would like you to clarify, Andy, one moment. The bikes will not be prevented from using the bridge or the roundabout, whatever. They may use either that or the path, is that correct?
Correct.
Because they are vehicles that are allowed on the road. So the pedestrians are, okay, so.
Right. Bicycles under Ohio law are considered vehicles, can travel in the street, following traffic laws. However, Ohio law also allows bicycles to travel on the sidewalk where they're not otherwise prevented. In this instance, we kind of looked at two types of cyclists. Cyclists who are your Tom Wolfes, your avid cyclists who have no trouble and feel very comfortable traveling with traffic and creating a situation where they can ride straight through the intersection. Also, we looked at mom and dad and the little kids with the bike with training wheels needing some type of facility that is separate from traffic, hence the idea of the shared use path that's 12 feet wide with a barrier wall along the bridge portion of it and the tunnel underneath 682, that you could totally separate that type of cyclist from traffic.
That was a clarification.
Yes, Councilmember Gosling.
Thanks for coming to speak to us tonight.
Appreciate that.
The question just came up because of Nancy's question. Does this include a pedestrian tunnel under that one section of 682?
It does, and this was in response to a significant number, it's in response to two things. Significant number of pedestrians that felt vulnerable regardless of whether there was a signal or not, and that's a lot of what we got out of the public involvement process, and said, hey, even though there's a signal there, I don't feel safe. And I'd like to be able to be separated from traffic. Lots of folks would have liked us to build a pedestrian bridge over 682. However, the space just simply wouldn't allow it because of the amount of clearance we'd have to get by putting a bridge over the top. The tunnel seemed to be a much more viable approach. The second reason is that it appears as though sometime within the next 3 to 5 years, Federal Highway Administration is going to put some restrictions on multi-lane roundabouts, specifically because of blind pedestrians. Blind pedestrians currently in that intersection, if you walk through there, we have an audible signal because we had a question about a blind pedestrian going through there, and that's the only signal in the city that we have the audible signal heads. one of the benefits, one of the reasons the roundabouts move such high volumes of traffic is that it's unsignalized. And it's up to the driver to yield and then to enter. We don't control the intersection. However, that's problematic with a continuous flow of traffic for somebody who's blind to hear when the gaps are. So that was the second reason that we looked at doing a tunnel as an alternate means of crossing the intersection. The option will also be provided for an at-grade crossing, specifically to combat the concerns that a number of pedestrians had about the safety of a tunnel. Specifically, dark, scary tunnel at nighttime, I don't want to go underneath the road. At nighttime, that's not when you have peak traffic. It's very easy for you to get across at road level, and this intersection will be well lighted, more so than it is now with this design.
Yes, Councilmember.
Andy, I would anticipate that a roundabout would be an energy-saving appliance for cars. They're not stopping and starting, they're not, is that true, do you know?
From what I understand, it is, and there is data out there. I don't have any with me today, but I can research that for you. Typically, for a vehicle to, I think the statistics are, for a vehicle to stop at a traffic signal from a 25 or 35 mile per hour speed and then restart again requires a 1/13th to a 1/12th of a gallon of gas to make that deceleration and acceleration. One of the benefits of a roundabout is that you in many cases, you yield upon entering. If there is no circulating traffic, you can go ahead and enter, and you just simply don't have the queuing that you have with a traditional signalized intersection. This is certainly in line with our Cool Cities initiative. I could probably get some data on intersections are measured in total delay. And we can look at the total delay assigned to a signalized intersection and then total delay assigned to a roundabout. And what total delay is the amount of time assigned to all vehicles that have to wait going through the intersection for one complete cycle of the light. They assign a number like that to roundabouts as well, even though there's not a signal. And you can look at the idling costs of a vehicle for that amount of time, that amount of vehicles for that amount of time versus the shorter amount, but I know that the total delay was much lower with the roundabout approach.
Okay. Yes, Councilmember Kuhn.
I was at a Chamber of Commerce committee meeting a while back, and there was some concern about people in wheelchairs using the tunnel. I assume that's taken into consideration when it's designed?
One of the things that, and if you look, and I can share it with you, ma'am, that particular alternative we've laid out where the pathways would go, and it appears as though there's kind of a longer route to get down to the tunnel than you would think. There's not a direct route per se as you look at it, and it looks kind of funny when you look at the overhead. The reason that is the case is in order to meet the grade requirements for compliance with the ADA, the Americans with Disability Act, and so you don't have too steep of grade to get down from the bridge level down to the level. You have to make kind of a longer path so you can meet the grade requirements, but also, in order to comply with ADA, we needed to do that. One of the things that we talked about is also providing a more direct route for folks who are not wheelchair bound, because as we know, whenever you look at an area of grass where pedestrians have the opportunity to either walk around with a sidewalk or walk straight through with the grass, they'll walk straight through with the grass and then track a grass track there. So we were going to provide both options.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, second agenda item for the Transportation Committee is a street closing that at this point is a request that's been made by email from the Mount Zion Baptist Church. And Ms. Johnson relayed this request to City Safety Service Director Paula Horan Mosley, and we have had several emails back and forth. The proposed date, as I understand, their first choice would be September 13th, but that's the date on which there's a home football game. And they do have an alternate date of the August 30th. And so Ms. Johnson said she wasn't able to be here tonight, but our purpose in bringing it up tonight is to begin the discussions of it and to see if there are any other additional questions or concerns. I know one of them that Director Mosley has already addressed with Ms. Johnson is that the cross or the closing of Congress Street might be problematic for the fire department. And do you have any more details you'd like to offer with us?
They did confirm, as you know, at least I thought you were copied on the email at the fire department, that is the direct line in order to reach those residential areas. I advised her that September 13th home football game, this would not be ideal time, and that I would recommend against it. It's ultimately up to council because it's a planned event. It is not anything for urgent or safety or public, urgent needs. And she did indicate in this email response that perhaps there were other locations, but did not share where that may be, because there's a parking lot area. They've had different events right within here. I was hopeful we'd get more information than we've received. It's very sparse.
So what I think we can do then is follow up with Ms. Johnson to see if she and her group have some other alternatives, then if they are amenable to the different date, and to whether or not the street could remain open, then it would certainly make it simpler. Other concerns? Councilmember Sands.
Actually, I think some of the original emails came to me through the Service Safety Director, and my concern was blocking off the street, that particular street, because there's not an easy reroute to go to use that. And I mentioned maybe using parking lot areas behind the church. And in her last email, she says something about the neighborhood groups sponsoring their back-to-school welcoming events. And that does actually occur in the parking lot adjacent to the church, not in the street. So if it's an overflow crowd, I guess might be people impinging on the street, but it's not actually blocking it. So I think this is a great idea, and we should work with residents in groups to provide opportunities for larger events. But in this case, maybe there's a better place in the street.
Thank you for the additional information. Councilmember Bain.
I guess I wonder if we would ever entertain a request to close a major arterial street for an event like this. I just can't imagine why we would even consider it. When we have those opening picnics, we've been able to handle large numbers of people on the sidewalks and in the front yard. And it seems that when we've closed streets, they've been little puny streets on side streets without threat. And the second question is, it's a very slippery slope. How does this compare to Oak Fest, Millfest, Palmerfest, and all the rest? If a church decided to sponsor one of those little bashes or something, or whatever. I just cannot see that we want to get in the business of doing this ever. I'd say, find a parking lot, do it there. And, I wouldn't vote to close any street for a festival like this unless it was uptown and it had a larger basis than this one has.
Okay. Thanks for your comments. Any other members or who have comments about this? Or questions? Okay, thank you. We'll continue the discussions. Councilmember Butler, Halloween is the next agenda item.
That's nice.
Did you get that?
We did a little negotiating, and in the spirit of preparation...
And you lost.
No comment. So in the spirit of preparation, we might as well begin our discussion of Halloween now in recognition of past ordinances which were in place to provide a fairly safe weekend. In the past, there was 4 ordinances, one being a glass-free drinking zone on Court Street, another ordinance recognizing a banning of parking and closing the portion of Court Street from Mulberry to Carpenter, and a third ordinance recognizing suspension of the enforcement of Athens City Code for vending, peddling, and soliciting. And then lastly would be an ordinance which would suspend the enforcement of Athens City Code unnecessary noise in the downtown area. And I believe if we look at the calendar correctly, this year, October 31st and November 1st would be the correct dates in which, presuming that might be when everything happens on Court Street for Halloween. So I'm beginning this process now so that we are prepared and can engage in discussion and dialogue with the new mayor and new city service director about which direction we want to go with Halloween. So, and the new law director. So if there's any comments or thoughts or discussion.
Could you ask Steve Pearson, perhaps, if $500, which has been steady, this is 07707, it's been 2 years since we wrestled that one through. Should we be raising it to $550 for the out-of-towners? Should we go up to $200 for the in-towners in terms of those
For
amounts of
fees?
money? Yeah, for fees.
Is this a vending?
For vending?
This is 07707,
Yeah, the
yeah.
vending's actually gone down last couple of years.
You mean the participation? Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I don't, because the people who sell uptown were always irate that we allowed vendors to be in front of their places, so. I mean, that was part of the reason why we said pay the true cost of it as opposed to subsidized. But I think we ought to ask the administration for some input on that. Is 500 enough for the amount?
Sure.
No fence,
What?
no fence.
No. Oh, don't even start. What a waste of time that was.
Mr. Gosney, did you have a question?
Yeah, just on the
Or comment?
vending licenses at least. I wouldn't support raising the fees for the local vendors. And this fee is for people that are already licensed in the city to vend, and I don't think that we
And I think
charge them much more than
I think Member Bain, you said out of town vendors.
Well,
did
you know,
Or-
I know the two that are up there all the time, but I think there are a lot of people that hold on to their B vending license in order to be a 150 user on Halloween. And if they can get away with it, I guess they're sharp operators, but.
It might be nice also, on a separate note, to engage the university in dialogue or discussion about Halloween and their input and willingness to be involved. So that might be something that we can explore either as a group of council or the new administration. So that's something also worth considering.
Chris had asked that we set up a meeting, and I'll take that action this week.
Okay. With the administration at the university? Okay, thank you. Is that as president of council or as
We're all members.
the
yeah.
mayor as well?
We've done this numerous
Sure.
times.
I didn't know
in
if you're
the past,
speaking with
so-
the mayor's hat or...
No, as president of council.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
I keep forgetting.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other thoughts or comments? Okay,
All right.
thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Butler. In many ways. Halloween, helping with that.
You're welcome.
Miscellaneous agenda item. We do have one item that I would like to bring up. Andy Stone, who's not with us now, but hopefully we won't have too many questions about it, has alerted us to the fact that in September, we will be applying for some Issue 1 funds. And rather than waiting till the last minute in September and having it authorized, we could move ahead this summer, if that seems appropriate then, to authorize the city to apply for those state funds. That's for a state economic stimulus package. And last year it was for the Carpenter Street rehab. So he's hopeful that we'll be successful this year in obtaining some of those funds. So just to alert you now that we'll move forward with that ordinance. And are there any other miscellaneous items for Transportation Committee that anybody needs to bring up? Okay.
Okay, community issues, we just have one item on our agenda. We, quite a while ago, were approached by the combined executive committees of committee of the neighborhood associations regarding their concerns about the growing problem of graffiti in the city. And Councilmember Nisley was part of that group and has kind of taken over council's discussion. She's been working with Law Director Lang to put together a proposed ordinance which might guide City Council in dealing with this issue. So I think that's being passed out to you right now. Member Nisley, you want to go ahead with discussion?
Okay, yes. Yes, thank you, Councilmember Sands, for helping move this forward, and also to Steve Pearson and Debbie Walker, who have helped in the crafting of this language, and then Pat Lang, thank you for helping us with the review. Just to summarize briefly, this draft of the ordinance, it does 4 things. It will add the word graffiti to Title 29 of the housing regulations, the sanitary requirements. It will also add the definition of graffiti to the Title 29 housing regulations. It amends the definition of blight and public nuisance so that it will include graffiti. And then it will also amend Title 29, which, as I understand, is a definitions section of the city code. And so it will include graffiti. And in this same definitions section, it will amend the definitions of blight and public nuisance to include graffiti. And just so we've made the information available, they're defining graffiti as any unauthorized inscription, word, figure, painting, or other defacement that is written, marked, etched, sketched, scratched, sprayed, drawn, painted, or engraved on, or otherwise affixed to any surface of public or private property by any graffiti implement, to the extent that the graffiti was not authorized in advance by the owner or occupant of the property, or despite advanced authorization is otherwise deemed a public nuisance. Any questions or comments?
Does this do the trick after our meeting a couple months ago? Is this it?
I would say that this is one avenue.
Is this it? I mean, this is what we're going to put forward?
This is what we're going to put forward after the work session that we held, in which there was general consensus not to have a separate ordinance working strictly with graffiti. It incorporates the definitions into the code. I think the other thing that it does, this ordinance doesn't, but I might add that this is just part of a program in which we're also, Safety Service Director Mosley has been working with the police department to also have the graffiti announced as a crime solvers listing. So we have that available. Trying to do some public education about this also, and then we also have the volunteer rapid response enforcement team that's ready to go out and volunteer to do some painting and graffiti removal on public places, we might add at this point. And then to also potentially work with city code to have regular letters issued to private property owners when there is graffiti, to make them aware that there is that it could possibly be a citation, but it also, at the same time, gives a reasonable period of time for people to respond to remove the graffiti. And I think we're also hoping to implement this if there is need where people can't have, don't have the funds available to be able to paint something on their own, that we would be able to utilize perhaps some of the paint program funds to help private homeowners.
It's fair to say that the ordinance is just one part of a much bigger anti-graffiti program involving different entities in the city.
Thank you. Much more clearly stated.
Just to
But
sum
he
it up, sum it
did
up.
all these words, right? So,
Okay.
we asked the law director, would the presence of indoor furniture on porches that's been burnt up multiple times, like on last weekend, weren't there 5 couch fires? Is that right, Paul? How many times?
I'm sorry, I do not know.
How many, they drag the furniture out and, I'm talking about the students who have said to me that they were really concerned somebody starts a fire in the street with a couch, that it's so hot and it's so full of pollutant because it's that urethane foam that, there's a danger there. I remember them saying, and especially those Halloween events that were so awful a few years ago, where they were concerned their porch was going to catch on fire. I guess I'd like to know, even though the fire was on the street, does the public nuisance then extend to that if the administration would choose to? I know we were on opposite sides, Pat.
To actually setting the couch?
No, setting the couch on fire is
I'll agree,
something.
that's cool.
But what about what you say here? You, I guess, said it. Any premises, wait a minute, where is it? Any premises which are manifestly capable of being a fire hazard or are manifestly unsafe or not secure as to endanger life, limb, or property.
I certainly think you can make the argument. I don't
enforce the code, but I just wondered if it was clearly.
If only we'd had something
negative.
like that 10 years ago when we were fighting.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Well, I know, but I just thought another blight.
Well, and
The
it's true.
fires,
Even
we've had
this past weekend, there was a couch that was in the Methodist Church parking lot. So you've got the Methodist Church parking lot and another house immediately behind it, and in a space of 20 feet.
Well, there was more than one fire, I believe.
Yeah, so,
But that one was probably when the people saw on their way to church.
yeah. So, well, I'd like to thank everybody for their contributions and comments about this, so we'll move forward then with this.
Chris, thank you for your leadership on this issue as well. You've been relentless in getting this whole thing put together, so we're getting close.
And I would just lastly add that members of the West Side are grateful as well for your hard work in addressing this issue. It's been something that was of concern to a number of West Side members, the First Ward.
Okay.
So thank you.
It's up for first reading next time.
Okay.
Okay, I have nothing else. I'm sorry. Just
Thank you.
sitting here. We're done.
We are through. We are adjourned.